I quit my McKinsey job or a BCG job or my XYZ job, and 3 months from now, I have to prepare for UPSC, to give my UPSC exam. I know odds are against me, but I'm willing to work hard. I'm willing to do anything that comes my way. How should I go about tackling the first stage? I am one of those folks who is a little lazy when it comes to working on things. I would want to focus a lot on efficiency. I want to maximize on outputs and minimize on inputs. And in this context, if someone like me is watching this video, that I again don't have time, but I'm going to work efficiently, how can I maximize my chances of getting into mains? And which pen did you use?
Oh God, this discussion never ends.
If we were to compare Indian Army, a career in Indian Army versus the Indian Police Services, how should you take a decision? Is there any separate exam for RAW in India? And if someone wants to be part of RAW, what's the way and means? Please do not, and I repeat, do not subscribe to this channel if you're looking for many such UPSC preparation strategy videos, because there is going to be none from here on. I'm not a UPSC mentor, neither do I intend to become one. My goal would be to provide you as much information as possible about life in the civil services and life outside the civil services. This podcast is going to be the only podcast where we discuss a UPSC preparation strategy end to end. So if you're dazed, if you're confused, if you're anxious about this exam, watch this video. If you're thinking of writing prelims examination, watch this video, bookmark it, and you can thank me later. If you're thinking of preparing for any aspect of civil services, watch this video because the content is going to be gold here. Please note, this is a lifestyle channel where we discuss my contrarian views and sometimes very controversial views on money, international affairs, careers, and how to actually live a life. But today is an exception because we talk about an exceptional exam called the Indian Civil Services. The Indian Civil Services examination is one of the world's most competitive exams. It is based on the British era Imperial Civil Services tests, as well as the civil services tests conducted by the old Indian empires such as the Mauryan Empire and the Mughal Empire. A single attempt can take 2 complete years of preparation, 1 year before the prelims and 1 year after prelims to interview. The first exam for the Indian Civil Services was held in London in 1855. Satyendranath Tagore, the elder brother of Rabindranath Tagore, became the first Indian to qualify for the Indian Civil Services exam in 1863. Thereafter, many prominent Indians have cleared this exam. Delhi's Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal, India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar, and the former India's Finance Minister Yashwant Sinha. In fact, India's freedom fighter Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose almost became a civil servant. But destiny had different plans for him, and he was the first of many who chose a plan B to contribute to country's growth story. Welcome to the season 1 of the Money Heist podcast. In this podcast, I'm absolutely delighted to introduce now my dear friend Anna Sinha, who is a member of the Indian Police Services. Hi everyone, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Anna to this podcast on Money Heist. So Anna, I was at Harvard Business School a few years ago to attend a talk by a hedge fund investor called Ray Dalio. He said one thing beautifully well in the entire talk. He said that youngsters these days, they are crazy about public markets. They are crazy about private markets. And they want to ensure that they have incredible IRRs, incredible returns in their portfolio. But one thing that is to be taken care of in your early 20s is investing in skill sets, in relationships, and of course, experiences. And one profession other than the IFS that we spoke deeply and in depth about with Prathit is definitely the Indian Police Services. And in this chat, I would love to learn more about your story, your background, and bits and pieces about your journey of getting into the Indian Police Services. So after you, Anna, tell us who you are and what's your story.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me, Naman, for this. Really honored. So, I'm Anna Sinha. I cracked the UPSC Civil Services exam 2021 with a rank 112, which got me into the IPS. Before cracking the civil services, I was a PhD scholar and a NET JRF scholar in economics. I have been deeply interested in policy, so I've worked with various think tanks like the Niti Aayog with Indian Statistical Institute, with BRICS International Forum, etc. I'm also someone deeply interested in culture.
Wow.
So I am trained in Hindustani classical music and in Bharatnatyam. I love reading. UPSC for me was a last minute kind of a decision, not something that I thought of giving in college or in school like most of us do. I was on my way to become an academician just like my parents, and I loved what I was doing. But I realized that the civil services and any service within the civil service gives us a lot of scope to engage with policy very deeply and engage with the people of our great nation. And I realized that maybe I should take the leap of faith and give the exam, and that's what got me here.
Fantastic, Anna. I think my usual understanding of a quintessential UPSC aspirant is that they're cloistered in their rooms in Karol Bagh or Rajendra Nagar. But having learned about you briefly, I get a sense that you are jack of all trades. You seem to be participating in cultural activities. You seem to be writing for the Economic Times. You seem to be writing viral posts on Twitter and across social media platforms. And you are also interning, and you're not just cloistered in your room. Is that a right understanding? And if yes, how were you able to efficiently manage your time?
Well, I wouldn't call myself jack of all trades. I'm just someone who believes in dabbling with different things to keep me rejuvenated in general. But my main interest is economics, and the other things that I do definitely keep me alive. So, yes, you're right. For most of the aspirants, it is about being in your room and following just your UPSC syllabus and just studying day in and day out. I would say that it's very difficult to really say what an aspirant's life looks like or what it should look like, because I think every person is a very different kind of a person. So
Yeah.
usually there are people who cannot really juggle with many things, and it's very disturbing for them. So if even if they want to, I'm sure there are many people who want to engage with a lot of things. They want to intern and they want to dance and sing, but they don't do that because for them the best way to go forward is to just prepare,
Yeah.
and that's how they are able to give in their best. Then there are other kinds of people. So the other kind of a person is a person like me. I find myself getting really dulled
Yeah.
if all I'm doing is one thing. So I realized right in the beginning that having been a very active student, I was a very active debater and an MUNer in college. Suddenly stopping everything and just studying
Mhm.
would not really work, in the best way for me. So I ended up doing a little bit of everything. Having said that, Bharatnatyam did definitely take a back seat. Hindustani classical music did, the riyaz did become periodic and
Mhm.
not like every day 1 or 2 hour thing that it used to be. And definitely I did have to stop interning. I was majorly advising students about and mentoring. I mentored around 500 plus people
Wow.
via Zoom, via LinkedIn, to get internships, which would take a relatively lesser time but make me feel really good. That UPSC is a long term, it's a very long journey,
Mhm.
and you don't have those tidbits coming your way to keep you motivated. So your brain just becomes really demotivated. And these little things that I did, I used to also cook and bake a lot.
Yeah.
That's also something I love doing. I absolutely
It's
love
such
it.
a stress buster.
It takes your mind off negativity, and that
Mhm.
comes as part of the journey. So I did those things to keep me alive, and that happened to work the best for me. It might not work the best for many other people,
Mhm.
and everyone has their own strategies. But yeah, not jack of all trades, definitely. Keeping myself alive in the journey.
Of course. And how long was the journey for preparing for UPSC? I think you mentioned informally a few minutes ago that it was a very last minute decision for you.
Yes.
So
Uh,
how did it pan out, and for how many months or years did you spend preparing for the civil services?
I think it was not a very long journey. It does feel long though. I think must have been around a year and a half for me.
And this includes the examination cycle as well.
So this for me the journey began during COVID. So what would it have been? 2019 end, 2020 beginning, and then in 2021, I gave the exam and the results came. So, around a year and a half, and also a very stressful time for most of us because COVID, and I think every family had faced some loss or the other. Also, I'm the only child. All the cooking, cleaning, everything was on me. I am someone who does not believe in putting any pressure on my parents. So while
Mhm.
I was studying, I was also doing household chores, and it was stressful. But yeah, I think it taught me a lot. Sometime in the future, everything's gonna come handy.
Mhm.
Cooking, cleaning, all of it, doing it for everyone around you. So yeah,
Of
that.
course. I think MS Dhoni seems to perform incredibly well when he is under pressure.
Absolutely.
It looks like something similar worked out for you in your favor. So I think as an economist, I'm sure you would have thought a lot about productivity at its very basic level. From scientific standpoint, it's output divided by input. And how do you get the maximum output? By putting in minimum things as the input. UK economy is crushing, probably because the productivity levels are terrifying. And for your UPSC journey, how do you maximize the productivity in such a less span of time? You were able to crack this exam with such incredible rank. That's an amazing feat. So let's give you a very difficult task. So let's assume that today I quit my McKinsey job or a BCG job or my XYZ job, and 3 months from now I have to prepare for UPSC to give my UPSC exam. I know odds are against me, but I'm willing to work hard. I'm willing to do anything that comes my way. How should I go about tackling the first stage? And thereafter we'll talk about second stage, and then we talk about the third stage. But we just have 3 months.
Yeah, so okay, I would suggest that first of all we go through the toppers talks because we need to know what is the best strategy. We cannot invent the wheel, reinvent the wheel. The
Yeah.
wheel's already there. We've got to see where the shoe pinched for most of the people and then make the best strategy. So listen to those talks. I think everyone will tell you that for prelims, the main thing that you have to do is cover your basic standard books very thoroughly and do not expand your sources. So you have your basics, like for polity you have Lakshmi Kant, for economy you should follow current affairs. You could pick any monthly magazine, for example Vision IAS has it, Insights has it. For geography you have your NCRTs, for art and culture you have your old NCRTs and Spectrum's Rajiv Ahir for modern Indian history. So these are a few standard books that you should be thorough with and not expand your sources.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I felt that revision was very important, and you should try to revise your static portion at least 4 times and your current affairs at least 3 times. Plus, most importantly, we need to focus on giving mocks
Yeah.
and taking those mocks seriously. So what I used to do was I bought a booklet which had OMR sheets,
Mm-hmm.
sample OMRs, and I
Okay.
used to mark them to simulate what really happens in the exam hall, because marking also takes time when you have to circle the OMR. And then behind the OMR sheet, it was a blank. There was a blank sheet that was given. There used to be an additional blank page,
Mm-hmm.
and all the mistakes that I used to make in the exam, I would note down, take a short note, a 1 or a 2 line note on the mistake itself.
Wow.
And then at the end of that mock, I would read those notes again. So, working on my mistakes in a very, I would call it in a very systematic manner.
Mm-hmm.
And right before the prelims, 2 days before the prelims, I would focus just on those notes where I erred. Through that, you end up recognizing that how many questions should you actually attempt and how many you should leave instead of making those hazardous guesses. So
Mm-hmm.
some people, I know, they're so good at it that even if they attempt 80 questions,
Yeah.
they're gonna get through. I've seen people who attempt all 100 questions and they hazard like 20, 25, 30 guesses and they happen to get lucky as well. So you've got to recognize your strategy. There is no set strategy and you have to work on what works best for you. And I think this is something that everyone will tell you, and
Mm-hmm.
it works. So for prelims at least, we are lucky that we have a set strategy to follow that way overall.
Okay, so just to summarize, that strategy would be to cover 5-6 basic books, revise them, re-revise them. After we're done with those basic books, and I'm sure everyone would be aware of those basic books. After revising those books, we also complete the mock papers, and we revise those mock papers by listing down our weaknesses and focusing on those weaknesses. And your strategy was that you attempted almost 90 to 100% of the UPSC prelims paper, and you were
Not,
sure about certain
not
answers.
100%. No.
Okay.
I'm not that great. No. I'm not that great. Nor am I such a big risk taker. I would normally attempt 90 to 95 questions, leave out the ones that I have absolutely no idea about.
Okay.
My
Makes sense.
guesswork, yeah, my guesswork would have around 15 questions. So I would be sure about 70 to 72 questions. I think most of us, if we are sure about, the guesswork is something that's personal to you, but having 70 questions that you're sure about is optimal. That's what you've got to know. And I think that's something that people can with your basic books. So
Got it.
it's doable.
So I want to delve deeper into prelims because many of my friends who got into UPSC civil services years ago, they were able to crack civil services prelims paper by a whisker. They didn't get a good score in prelims. For some, that was the case, but for many, that wasn't the case. And they always keep on telling me that prelims at least has a huge component of luck. You can minimize that with immense amount of hard work. You can minimize that with immense amount of smart work, but still there is a huge component of luck. So just to summarize the strategy again, so for approximately, if you've read these basic books, you can attempt 50 to 60% of paper very easily. And then remains the 40% of the paper where you have to compete, and the component of smart work comes into picture. So if you're sure about eliminating one option, would you attempt it? Would you take a guess?
Definitely. I think elimination worked for me. It really paid off. And I think elimination for most people would work if you're doing a little bit of extra reading, just a little bit. Extra reading meaning you're reading your newspaper, but you're also reading a little bit of non-fiction. That helps. Or you're reading, you follow, for example, a good magazine or an online journal. So I really like following economic journals. I really like following The Diplomat, for example, one of my favorite magazines. So online magazines. So it really helps. For example, there was a question last year that who are the members of the Turkic Organization of Turkic States? And I'm sure it's not there anywhere in the syllabus, nor is it there in the current affairs as much. It's not highlighted. But so most of us won't know, and you have to use eliminate. Most of us would leave it. But
Yeah.
if you look at it closely, there were options which gave you a lot of scope for elimination. If most of us have read about the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, we can easily see that Turkey, being the leader of that group,
Yeah.
whose relations are not good with it, which side does Turkey take in the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, and you can eliminate. I remember I'd used some kind of logic to see for my juniors how you could have eliminated that. So just a little bit of extra reading would really help you eliminate a lot of wrong answers and make you perform really well in the exam. And I think elimination is your definitely your number 2 strategy, aside from number 1 knowing your static really well. Eliminating, and that comes with extra reading and also with practice. So again, try to attempt 50 papers at least of mocks, and seriously, not like I'm going to take 3 hours to do a 2-hour paper, not like that. Try to finish it in 1.5 hours. Try to then finish. So I remember right before the prelims, I tried to finish my paper in 40 minutes, 45 minutes. So
Wow,
try to do
40
that.
minutes for the entire paper? That's incredible.
Yes. So try to do that. And I think with elimination and knowing your basics, you can definitely do it. We just need to have a little bit of confidence, which frankly none of us do. I might be sounding confident now. I was super jittery before the exam. You have to be really bold that day when you go out there and just believe in yourself.
So, and I think I like this strategy that, 50% I can do if I'm working really hard. For the rest, 40 to 50%, I will use elimination. And if I'm able to eliminate at least one option, I'll take the educated risk. And if I'm not sure about any of the options, I will leave it. And majority of questions will not fall into that bucket. Approximately 5 to 6 questions would be those questions if where you have absolutely no idea.
Yeah.
Great. This is very helpful. And makes a lot of sense. I think we're done with prelims. We will be attempting mains, hopefully, in a few months. And I have absolutely no idea of mains. I've gone through toppers videos. I've done diligent preparation for prelims. I've gone through the standard books. Could be India's Struggle for Independence, could be Spectrum, could be Polity, and I'm good with those basics. But I haven't yet started my answer writing practice. I am not forming opinions. I'm not reading extra books. I've just secluded myself to the exclusive UPSC preparation as of now. Now, how should I prepare myself in the next 2 to 3 months that I will be able to crack mains without coaching, of course? I think you also mentioned briefly that you did not join any coaching institute.
Okay, so I think take a little bit of a break after prelims. 5 days maximum a week, you deserve it. After that, it's very important to look at past year question papers. So it really gives you an idea about what kind of and what level of questions are going to be asked, how much of it is going to be based on opinion and how much of it on fact. And then I would suggest that try to start with answer writing. So you might not be really good at it in the beginning, doesn't matter, just start. You need to break the fear of not being able to write the perfect answer, because there is no perfect answer. Just start. And after that, after you're done with say 3 years of past year papers, try to enroll yourself in a test series and there get your answers evaluated. They will tell you where you lack, and even if you're not able to have a one-on-one with the said mentors, you can have a look at their sample solutions, which really adds a lot to what you're writing and the structure of your answer. So your structure is important, past year papers are important, and content, of course, the way you present what you already know is important. I also need to tell if the aspirants here are listening, that we think that we've got to do extra reading for the mains. That's not really true. So I think a majority of the reading is done by prelims, and now you've got to know how to present what you already know in a very cohesive manner.
Yeah.
So for that, the main thing is writing the answers instead of reading anything more. Given the limited time, don't focus on reading. Secondly, for me, I think optional for me was very important. I had economics as an optional. Despite my education in economics, I was still very, very jittery that I might not be able to do that well, because as an optional, it's definitely a tough optional. You have very technical questions. You have many new models that are asked every year. There's a googly question, and you've got to be very precise if you have economics as an optional. So that for me was the focus for the first 1.5 months at least. The GS for me started much later. I was doing past year papers, but I did not join a mock until much late into the prep. My first focus was optional. Within the optional, now how should you go about it? So I tried to first of all do subject-wise past year papers. Instead of picking a whole new, like a whole assorted paper, where you might be having to answer questions from all over the syllabus of the optional, it can be very disturbing to you. It can feel very demotivating as well. Try to go for a subject wise approach. For example, microeconomics first, macro later, international economics later, development later. So I felt for me what worked was when you get to work on questions which subject wise, you feel like that part of the syllabus is at least done and dusted properly. And then you move on to the next, and right at the end I tried to do a few full length past year papers. So only when you feel relatively strong in the subjects, in the parts of the syllabus, should you go and then solve the whole syllabus taken together. At least this was the thing that worked for me. I do know many people who directly go and solve full length papers. I would say that's definitely a superpower, but for me, the subject wise thing worked. The other thing that I would like to tell aspirants here is that there is no set rule here for the mains that these are the number of question papers that you should solve. Unlike the prelims here, quality really matters. So instead of quantity of questions that you're doing. So I know people who went ahead and did 20-30 full length papers. I also know people who just gave 2 papers. One of my seniors topped the economics optional paper 2, having not given even a single mock exam for the subject.
Wow.
So there, and I think that was amazing.
And how many marks did you give for your optional?
I got very average marks. I got around 280 marks. There was a lot of scope for 140, 140. So there was a lot of scope for improvement there. But I know people who did really well despite not giving so many marks, and I know people who did average giving a lot of marks. I personally could not give many marks. I gave 4 marks, that's it. I could not. And also because I felt that just giving mocks for the heck of it, not being prepared enough, I just didn't feel like doing that. But go by what makes you feel confident. If you feel attempting mocks is going to give you the energy, the focus, the concentration, and the motivation, by all means go for it. If you feel it might just be a waste of time because it's 3 hours that you're given where you could be just practicing answer writing and learning from toppers, then don't. It's not a fetish. Because I told you, one of my seniors got like 170 marks in paper 2 without giving a single mock. So it's a very personalized thing. You cannot, for mains, it's a very, very personalized strategy that you should have.
This is incredibly helpful. And I am one of those folks who is a little lazy when it comes to working on things. I would want to focus a lot on efficiency. I want to maximize on outputs and minimize on inputs. And in this context, if someone like me is watching this video, that I again don't have time, but I'm going to work efficiently, how can I maximize my chances of getting into mains? One strategy that someone told me was that the easiest and the most difficult parts of the mains exam would be the essay paper, the optional, and the ethics paper. Because if you just think logically, you can score really good marks, depending upon your optional, of course. And these are the papers where you will be distinguishing yourselves from the rest of the test takers. For all the GS papers, paper 1, paper 2, paper 3, you can get average scores, but in the essays, optionals and ethics, you can definitely have that propulsion of good score. How good is that strategy? How relevant is that strategy? What are your thoughts?
Well, I really refrain from giving out any proper, like any set strategy, because all the time I have so many counter examples in mind. People who did exceptionally well in all 4 GS papers. I think one of the past toppers, Shushti Deshmukh ma'am, she got like I think a 125 in all 4 GS papers, and that was the thing that got her into a rank 5. And of course, then there are people usually, it said, yes, you're right, that if you focus on ethics and essay and optional, it's going to catapult to you. So I don't know. I think there are options. There are examples of being able to do well in using both of the strategies. It really depends on you. So for example, if you're the ethics essay person, which would mean that usually you're someone who likes to dabble in other things, to be able to write a good essay, for example, if you love reading or if you love watching movies, you could get in a lot of references there and score really high marks there. If you love reading a little bit of philosophy, again, ethics can be helped. If you're very, very sure-footed in your optional, you could do really well. I know people who got marks in 90s, etc., in their, even 80s, in their GS, and then they got 170, 170 in their optional, and that's what got them in the top 10. So yes, if you're that person, then go with that strategy. If you're not, if you think your basics are so good and you can present your GS in such a stellar manner that you can do really well, you should definitely go with that. So my basic point is that I really feel there is no set strategy. It is about getting to know what kind of a person you are. And right, if you want to maximize your gains, maybe yes, you can look at essay, you can look at ethics, but again, you can be a person who does really well in the GS, and neglecting the GS may cost you, because that may be your like quotient, winning quotient.
And I think if you have prepared diligently for prelims, if you're clearing prelims with a good score, don't you think those folks have already have good grasp over paper 2 and paper 3 and paper 1 already? And now may be the time to focus exclusively and holistically on the optionals, essays, and the ethics, the components that many may not have studied diligently, at least during the prelims preparation.
I think personally, regardless of everything, you need to focus on optional at least. Definitely. Don't neglect it. But about the grasp, as you mentioned, I agree. I think every single person has a very good grasp over all the GS topics, because you've cracked the prelims, 1% success rate, you definitely know everything. But the mains is not about grasp as much as it is about presentation, and putting across what you know. Many of us know a lot, we are not able to put it across. That happens with everyone, it happened with me as well. And there are many of us who might know maybe a little less, but they're very, very good at presenting those things. So they stick to their GS. I know personally, I know many peers who just stuck to their GS. And they said, Acha, optional may, if even if I'm getting like average marks, it's okay. I'm not going to put in too much time. So, and they did really well. So it really depends on you. And which is why I keep saying that it's not now time when you talk about mains to make your grasp over the subject better, for the GS at least. It is about writing, and it is about getting yourself evaluated to know where it is that your winning quotient lies. And if early on you can gauge that, then
Yeah.
I think that's the best. Most of us don't end up doing that, and we end up focusing on everything. And so, well, it doesn't translate into very good marks, but I think, yeah, strategizing, that really helps, and getting to know where you should really focus. About essay, I will say that you don't need so much of a practice. If you generally know how to write, there are people who do struggle with it if English is not their second language or first language, or for them, and they've taken English as their medium. I have seen people really struggling with the essay, and if in case you're someone who's not very comfortable with that, then by all means focus on essay as well. But if you can generally write in a flow, you generally have certain hobbies that you like, you're into, you read and you watch movies, etc., and you can get in references, you don't need to. So this, like, I gave one mock for the essay that gave me good marks. I got 138 marks in the essay. I could not give mocks for the interview. I gave two mocks. That was it. My interview was scheduled on the very first
We'll
day
talk
of.
about interviews, but given your kind of extracurriculars,
Yeah,
I'm sure the essays would have been a cakewalk because of the diverse experiences with the diverse internships, so on and so forth. You also spoke very brilliantly about something called the presentation, which matters a lot during your mains preparation. What were the 3-4 quintessential presentation hacks that you followed through across papers that you think are good well for you?
I don't know if I have so many hacks, but I usually try to follow a proper introduction, body, and conclusion kind of a format. In the beginning, when I tried to follow it, it was eating into my time, and I could not keep up with the time limit. But then I really worked on the timing so I could meet the time and include all of those, that paraphernalia into it. Giving examples also is very important. If for every 3 points you can give two examples, it's very, very good. um, for example, you're talking about women's empowerment, and then you can give the example of Seva Bharat, or you can give the example of Lijat Papad, for example. You are talking about microfinance, you can talk about Grameen Bank, for example. So for giving examples, following a proper format, that helps. When you don't have time, you can use diagrams. I will say, don't try to use diagrams for the sake of it. um, Many of the aspirants try to do that just to look cool. It might help you, but it might backfire if those diagrams are not making sense or they're extra. Use diagrams, if especially to use lesser time when you don't have time. The other thing, the most important thing for me was to finish the paper. Many of the people told me, my seniors, that even if they know everything in the paper, they end up wasting so much of their time in the first few answers where they know everything, that they don't end up finishing the paper. That is not the optimal scenario. Of course, again, there are examples of people who have left 2-3 questions and they have got a rank in the top 20, but that's not something that there's a lot of chance there. So usually we should try to finish the paper. For that, we have to be very ruthless. Many times we know a lot of things, we know 10 points and 20 points, and we want to write all of them. Try to not do that. Stick to those 5 to 7 points so you can complete the paper. So these few things from my end.
And which pen did you use?
Oh god, this discussion never ends. Okay, So let me see. Oh, I use the Jiffy gel. What was it? Reynolds, I think. It's a 5 rupees gel pen, very bright blue color, and it happened to work best for me.
Okay.
Uh, yeah, because I know V7 is a big rage, V5 is a big rage, but somehow it didn't work for me. My handwriting with that would look like something happened, And if I wrote with a pilot pen, it looked like a man was dying and that was his echocardiogram. So I just settled for something in between. This was the pen that I basically practiced my previous year questions with the timing. And last May, when I remember sitting with my parents I bought like 7 pens and I showed them my handwriting with it. And they had their opinions to give that which makes my handwriting look better. There were pens which made my handwriting look better, but I was just not comfortable with them. So I think you should go with a pen that you've been practicing with. Even if it's a ball pen, if you can write fast in it, definitely go for that one.
Hmm. And I think you should be sponsoring your you should be getting these sponsored advertisements from these pen
Sure.
companies. But yeah, I think this is extremely important because at the end of the day, it's about getting good marks in mains, and the kind of pen that you use also has a little bit of role to play. So thank you so much for that. And my sense is that your strategy for mains was a lot like prelims, where you focused a lot on completing the paper, and it makes a lot of logical sense because getting the average marks in all the answers is relatively easier than getting high marks in those specific questions. So you can get 4 marks in every answer or every question, but getting the top end of those marks is difficult. So it makes sense. Complete the paper, and then you can focus on exclusive answers to get more brownie points in those questions.
Absolutely. And you need to have examples at hand, definitely. From current affairs or your extra reading, or
Hmm.
even quoting books. I did quote some papers as well. I don't know how that went down with the examiners, but I did it. And if you're reading and if don't put in extra time for it, but if you have been reading something extra or watching something, definitely quote those things if you can, if you have time. Leave a little bit of space when you complete the answers so that if you have those 5 minutes in the end, you can add these things, these examples in your previous answers. Try to do that.
Got it. Before I move towards your interviews preparation, I also want to talk about the non-traditional UPSC books or articles or forums that might have enhanced your chances of getting good score in mains. So a very good friend of mine, he got into the IFS, and he told me that he used to diligently read McKinsey Insights, and it was of extreme importance for him because the partners writing McKinsey Insights had a very good understanding of the market.
Sure.
According to you, other than reading the quintessential traditional books, what other books or articles or forums help you in the entire journey?
I think the fact that I was engaged with various think tanks in advisory roles, it did make me come across a lot of diverse set of sources from many different places. So, for example, I was engaged with a think tank, Defense Research and Studies, and therein there are loads of research papers posted on defense manufacturing from various sources. They're diverse set of sources, India and abroad. So I used to make it a point to, in my free time, to read those things. I think reading Niti Aayog reports, that helps. Reading the economic surveys original, not the usual that you get, the gist that you get from coaching institutions. Reading those things, that really helps. Um, I was doing a lot of, so my PhD was going on. It still is going on, but at that time it was at its peak, and I was giving presentations every fortnight to the faculty there, and for that I was reading a lot as well on the economy. So that came from BCG, that came from many papers which are published on Springer, many papers that are read on JSTOR. So those things definitely help you. I did not follow a particular forum, but these diverse set of sources helped me. Sometimes when I would think some things are very topical, I would note down the name of the paper, note down the report or the stats. So that helped. Um, And I'm not sure if this is a non-conventional thing anymore, but yes, having a data bank really helps. Your statistics on development, on economy, on defense, on
Mhm.
environment, quoting those statistics from various reports, that helps. So yeah, that's what I did.
Absolutely. And I'm astonished and surprised that so economic survey is such a beautiful piece of book. And I'm surprised that people don't read it. People read the summaries given out and doled out by the coaching institutes.
Yes. Um, I think that's because the size of the survey, it's so daunting.
Hmm.
Two volumes that are huge, and most of us have paucity of time. Uh, but I would really suggest that read the survey. It's written in a very lucid manner, even if it's a very long survey. It's very lucid, easy to read, lots of examples, makes you feel connected most of all to your country and what's happening. So I think all of us should read it.
And I think more so, you can use these data in your essays, interviews, and various papers, paper two and paper three, and even in
Absolutely,
ethics to some extent. The kind of
absolutely.
philosophies talked about in the economic survey. So I think it should be a no-brainer to read through it, a publication by the government of India for an exam that is for government of India.
Sure, I think nowadays most of the people do read it, but again, from the coaching institutions, try to read the original because much more examples, many more examples are there, and of course, much more insightful than just a summary. So, what I used to do is I used to open the survey in my mobile and kind of highlight the important parts and go through it later, just the highlighted parts. So that would help definitely in the economy section and even in my optionals. So that can be done, that should be done.
What if I end up failing in civil services? So how did you curb your anxiety levels? How did you take care of your mental well-being? Because UPSC indeed is an arduous, long journey. Your MBA schools will not value you. If you were to pivot into any job, that will be a Herculean task. Your peers are doing so wonderful, such wonderful work. They could be behemoths in private sector, could be launching their own start. Is there any separate exam for Raw in India? And if someone wants to be part of Raw, what's the way and means? Fantastic, very helpful, Anna. So let's move on to after clearing mains or after writing mains. What did you do, and how did you maximize and use those days efficiently until you prepared and appeared for the interview?
So right after maze, it was what I would be doing would be very different from most aspirants. I was conducting my survey, field survey for the PhD, and that involved going out there and speaking to. So my work is in labor economics, and I was taking a survey for the people there, and there's quite a lot of gap between the mains and when the results are announced and when the interview takes place. So once the results were out, I spoke to some of my friends who had given this exam before to get an idea of what they usually do. And I had no idea about how mocks are done, how many to take, how to prepare. Really did not have any idea. So I spoke to them and I realized that what you basically do for the interview is that you've got to know about yourself first and foremost. Uh, where do you come from? What are the issues in your district? What's something as simple as what does your name mean? What was, talk about your school, your college, everything. Then your subject, the subject that you graduated, post graduated in. Um, and once this part is done, you've got to focus, you've got to brush up your current affairs definitely. This is very, very important for the interview. Reading a newspaper daily, that's something that I did. I think most of us do that, but you've got to be a little more detailed here. Does not mean you sit with a highlighter with the newspaper and read it for 2 hours, no, but immerse yourself into it. Um, so being thorough with the current affairs, I think the static portion is something we've already done in the prelims and mains. Personally, I felt I didn't have to go through that part again. So your current affairs and data about yourself, once that's done, you can make a file where you note down in very brief about your hobbies and all of these things. Revise from there maybe if you need to, and then some mocks. So again here, very subjective thing. Many people I know attend 20 and 30 mocks. Many of them attended 1 or 2 mocks and they did very well. So I did not have much time because my interview was scheduled on the very first day of the whole schedule, and I was
Wow.
the second person to go in.
Is it because of the alphabetical order of your name?
Well, no one really knows, but some of my seniors told me that yeah, because I live in Delhi and my name starts with an A, so they kind of prioritized being done with those people first. So maybe, but no one knows, it's UPSC. So yeah, so I did not have much time. And also at that time, my mother was going through some health issues, and I being the only child, I was accompanying her to the hospital. So not an ideal state of affairs, and I was really at a very low point mentally, because I knew there are people out there who are giving mocks, and I'm spending a lot of time in the hospital and in the cab going there and coming back. So I would be in a very despairing state, and I remember telling my mom that I may not be able to do it, because how can I compete with people who are putting in efforts like that, there are no free lunches. So she said, I will take your mocks. I will ask you. So my mother is a professor in political science, and she's a very aware person herself. She has been a very, very big part of my journey, and she she was a very big reason why I didn't have to take a coaching. She would help me understand concepts, chart out a schedule when I needed one, and she would most importantly make my spirits be high when they dipped many times throughout the day. Not a very motivated person myself. I am motivated about the final goal, but um, every day is a struggle, and sometimes every hour is a struggle where you're in the middle of your whole prep. So she's the one who brought me up. So in that time also, she said that why don't we do this? I will ask you questions and try to answer them like you are in a mock or you are in the interview. And she would then ask me questions and I would answer, and then she would correct me that you could have phrased it like this, or you could have added this point. So that's how I kind of uh, prepared, so to say. I did end up giving 2 mocks, and I would say very helpful, because there are senior bureaucrats who are sitting there who make you see your blind spots, and they make you understand that these are areas you need to work upon. So, for example, I am originally from Bihar, and so my mother is from Bihar and my father is from Jharkhand, but I've never lived there. So, then some of the people on the mock panel asked me about those areas and the economy there. I could not really give many points there, and so I realized that okay, I need to know more. So then I sat down with those Niti Aayog reports, the state SDG index, read up the history about the industry in Bihar, pre-colonialism se leke till the time that in 2022 the beer industry and everything. So, and how the dry state policy impacted that and all of those things. So those blind spots were important for me to work upon. I made short notes. I made basically a file folder which had distinct like pages, which had one page for hobby, one page for state, one page for my name, one page for economy, economics, and all of those things. And with all of that, and with a general humility when you talk, with a general composure when you talk, I think we can do well in the interview. So I got 195 marks in the interview, and yeah, I think that kind of helped me get the rank that I got. There's obviously scope for improvement in every single thing that we do, but generally these are the things that we can follow. And I will say overarchingly that you should focus on current affairs a lot, because I was asked personally current affairs of that day itself. In the morning, something had happened. There was an initial public offer of Kotak Mahindra, I think I'm forgetting one of the companies. And I was asked a question on that, and I could answer that, and they were really happy with that. So, so being aware of current affairs helps. Being genuine about your hobbies helps. Personally, when I've mentored students, many of them tell me that I don't even have a hobby. So, what should I fill? You should not fake it. Yes, you do. If you have 2 months, you can explore hobbies as simple as, say, gardening, jogging, taking nature
Okay.
walks. That can be explored, but don't try to fake it, because they are very senior people who will recognize what you're saying is
Hmm.
true or not true. I had mentioned a lot of hobbies. I had mentioned Hindustani classical, I mentioned Bharatnatyam, I mentioned reading, I remember mentioning many, many hobbies. And I was asked 5 to 6 questions on every hobby. My interview went on for 45 minutes. And they really grill you and they try to understand how deep you are in your subject or in your interest. So I've been trained in classical dance, and the gentleman there, he said that, oh, classical dance, Bharatnatyam, so tell me about Kuchipudi. One of them asked me, you've been trained in Hindustani classical music, all right. Tell me about, they asked me about a folk music tradition.
Hmm.
And if you're not actually someone interested in culture, you will not be able to answer by reading Nitin Singhania or by reading ancient Indian history books. Uh, if only if you're interested. So I had been to Spick McKay's. I used to go to all those concerts because I genuinely love these things. So somewhere I could answer questions that were posed, and that really, that genuineness and that deep interest, that shows through. And you should try to be very strong in your hobbies if you're mentioning them.
Absolutely. And how is your mother doing now? I hope she's doing well.
Yeah, she's much better, touch wood. Yeah, we are
Okay.
working towards an even better position.
Especially
But
after your rank.
yeah, I think that helps mentally. That does.
Okay. So, one thing that I would also want to talk about, and we'll delve deeper into your UPSC interview day, is the component of mental health, component of support system, component of anxiety. Because I think it's often said, if you can curb your anxieties, you will be infinitely more productive than anyone else in the world. So, how did you curb your anxiety levels? How did you take care of your mental well-being? Because UPSC indeed is an arduous, long journey, and it's never a straight line for almost anyone. So, how did you ensure that you took care of your mental health and mental well-being? What would be your advice to whosoever is watching this video and is looking up to you?
Okay, so mental health is an issue for all of us, aspirants or anyone in general, any point of their lives. Mental health is very important. During UPSC, especially more. Uh, if you are an emotional person, or if you are someone who can get anxious more than others, it definitely impacts you much more. Anxiety being a normal component for every aspirant's life, you would be even more affected than that. So yes, having a support system is very, very important. For me, the support system was my parents, especially my mother. She's my best friend who got born as my mother. So most of us have our sisters, brothers, some of us have our friends. There's one person at least who you can talk to, and actually talking to someone about how you're feeling is very important, instead of bottling up your feelings, your anxiety, because then that gets worse and it really impacts your preparation. It does. So my advice would be to cultivate at least one meaningful relationship around you. You are preparing, but your family is very important as well. You should not leave out that very important system and the loved ones behind you in anything in your life in general. This is my advice, even after you crack the exam. And if there are friends, for example, that you have, you should be in touch with at least one or two of them, uh, and not just talk about your own issues but also theirs, because that is what helps everyone get more emotive towards each other at the end of the day, and cultivate a relationship wherein you can get meaningful advice.
Absolutely.
um, and hobbies really help. I spoke about other hobbies I had, but one of the more recent hobbies that I cultivated during COVID, baking and cooking, that helped
Hmm.
me the most. When I was baking, when I was cooking, my mind was completely off any negativity, and I was so happy. It was a very, very big elixir for me. So cultivating one hobby at least, being in close touch with at least one person you can speak to is very important. There is absolutely no one who has not faced anxiety or mental stress in this journey. I don't think there's anyone like that. We're all human. But once you get through it, you realize that the anxiety that you were facing and all the, all those times when you felt like nothing is possible or things are getting too hard on you, those matter very less as compared to what you get in the end. What you get is that you get to work for the people of your country. You get to do something much larger than what you've been doing before. Let's face it, the services give us a very, very big scope for impacting the lives of people, any service, in different ways. So, if you remember that the goal is much bigger than your anxiety, which is temporary, then that thing more than any other thing keeps you going. Um, for me, I felt very low many times, and when I spoke about it, I felt better. But if you ask me the one thing that really kept me going, that was my goal. Once I decided that I have to do this, that was it. I was not reconsidering my decisions, and that was enough for me to keep going. Many times I even felt that being anxious about some things, that oh, I'm not doing well here and I might end up doing really badly, helped me even prepare that part better. So, channeling our emotions and remembering the larger goal while having at least one or two people with you, having one meaningful hobby, I think these things are more than enough to get you through. And if you have pets, then that's a very big support system as well.
Okay, makes a lot of sense, Anna. So one question that I get often from many of the folks who are contemplating to prepare for civil services is, what if I end up failing in civil services? Because it's such an arduous journey. You require a lot of time commitment. And if you, for some reason, end up failing the exam in the first attempt, the entire year is gone if you're not doing anything else other than preparing for civil services. And then the sunk cost fallacy kicks in, where you end up reappearing for the same exam, studying the same books, and not yielding much outcome or outputs out of it. So, and this leads to a lot of anxiety and stress, because now, if you've wasted multiple years, your MBA schools will not value you. If you were to pivot into any job, that will be a Herculean task. Your peers are doing such wonderful work. They could be behemoths in private sector, could be launching their own startups, so on and so forth. But you're stuck preparing, revising Lakshmikant and GC Leon. So what would be your advice to them? How can they curb their anxieties? How can they prepare for plan B? How can they pivot and relaunch their career?
I think first of all, the strategy of not doing anything else while doing the preparation is not, according to me, very optimal. When you drop a year or you drop 2 years or 3 years of, say, your education, especially if you're a student, not a working professional, I have seen people getting very dull, getting very cut off, and not performing optimally, and people joining studies again just to do better in UPSC and actually ending up doing better. So if you're studying right now, and for example you're thinking, should I take 2 years off or should I go ahead and do an MA, you should try to go ahead and enroll yourself for an MA, enroll yourself for an educational course, and try to do this side by side. Trust me, it is doable. Yes, you will be overworking, but that's part of life. At some point or the other, you have to push yourself. So yes, for working professionals, I will say that if working and not education was something that would have been what you would be doing had it not been UPSC, then it can be very daunting for you. I think you should set a time limit for yourself, that okay, I will give myself these 2 attempts, I will give myself these 3 attempts, and post that, no more, and I will go back into my careers. Once you do that, I've heard a lot of working professionals saying this, that once I said that I just have this one attempt, I just have these 2 attempts, I ended up leaving no stone unturned and I did really well. Many of my seniors have done this and they performed wonderfully. So setting limits for yourself, not cutting yourself off from the world, that helps. Plan B, planning it out, definitely I would say you should try to do that based on your competencies and your interests in life, and professional interests, of course, because it's a very uncertain exam. We really don't know what would be the outcome despite all your preparation or your brilliance. So, just having one plan is a very risky thing. Have a plan B, definitely. And many people do really well despite not cracking. So, this is not the only thing to do in life, of course. It's definitely not the start or an end of a road. There are careers in policy. There are careers in think tanks. If policy is what interests you, I think what you are doing, Naman, for example, everyone who's listening, that is something that really helps people carve out exactly that, get a plan B and work towards it and do really well there. So uh, we should definitely by all means try to carve out a perfect plan B for them, for ourselves, and not take it too seriously in the beginning, but later, yes, work on it.
Absolutely, very well said. And 20s indeed are the most productive years of your life. And many stalwarts have said that the day and age of monolithic careers is over. And if for some reason you're not getting what you have always dreamt of, along the journey you will figure out a lot many things. So as long as you are working on things. Beautifully said, Anna. So let's delve deeper and talk more about your interview day. How did you feel? What was going in your mind? Did you sleep well the night before? And how did the morning look like and the entire journey?
It's said that you've got to have a very good 8 hour sleep, and at no point in my whole exam cycle could I manage that. Sometimes I was studying during prelims and mains, I was studying, so I couldn't get the sleep. And before my interview, I couldn't get it because I was just so, I don't know what it was. I was really excited, maybe. So I couldn't sleep for a long time. And I woke up and I remember telling myself that, you know, I wish I could go back one day and just like make myself sleep because I would be feeling much better. But as I got ready, I felt better, rejuvenated, and myself again. So I remember telling my parents that please don't come to drop me there. It makes me feel even more vulnerable. I'll do it myself. I'll feel stronger that way. I booked a cab and I went there. And I remember even in the cab, I was doing my field survey, which is I was interviewing the cab driver because I told him my work involves labor, economics, and I was doing that. And I know for most people this is very strange because everyone is revising, but I was doing this. It was helping me get into my skin, and also kind of helped me depressurize myself. Once I reached there, I remember there were queues and queues of people waiting outside to get into building. People were clicking pictures. I was just I was just sitting somewhere on one of the pavements. I took out my file, started revising a little bit, and I was not in a hurry to get into the exam center because once you get in, you don't really get to read as much. So I revised and I got in. And once you get in, you are escorted into a room where your documents are verified. You've got to bring your original degrees and all of it.
Yeah.
And you're sat on a round table with roughly five other people who probably have the same board as yours. You do not know which board you will be getting, and it's a surprise. So I remember sitting there and talking a little with the fellow candidates over there. And it was really nice getting to know some of them, and many of them got through the list as well. So later, speaking to them about that day was good. So I was the second to go in for the interview, and it was a very cordial experience. If you go for mocks or if you watch mock videos, you will feel like there's a lot of cross questioning that's involved, and it's a very aggressive space. It's not like that at all. People are smiling. They are really happy. They make you feel very comfortable. And post COVID, the seating arrangement is such that there is one person sitting at the back of the table, right in front of you, and there are four other seats in a horseshoe pattern around the instead of them sitting as a board together on a single table. And I remember it starts with the chairperson of the board. Usually they ask you to introduce yourself, and or they read out your introduction. He starts or she starts with the questioning, and then it's passed on to other members of the board. So it was a very good experience. In-depth questions were asked. I think every single
I'm very curious about how did it go? I mean, in terms of what questions did they ask you? What excited you? What made you nervous? So let's start from the beginning. You entered the room and tell us the story.
yeah. So a faux pas happened before I entered. Just sharing this. So I didn't realize that when I was passing, you're made to sit outside the room before you enter it, and there's glass on the door, and the glass is very reflective. And for a while, you'll think like you can't be, so it's opaque on the inside, and they can't see you. So for a while passing through, I was adjusting my sari, and the peon told me that they can see you. So I was adjusting the pleats, so I immediately anyway, so that was like, oh shit, I shouldn't have done that. But anyway, so I went inside, and it started off from current affairs. So I remember that the Sri Lankan crisis, economic crisis, was on. My background being in economics, I was asked in depth about what led to the crisis. And usually, so I gave a very long term perspective of that, the crisis beginning with policies of the president at that time being inspired by Recep Tayyip Erdogan from Turkey, and how those two policies played out differently in Turkey versus Sri Lanka. And then I came to the present times, that there were a few things that happened, 4 or 5 decisions that were taken also in the short run, which led to the crisis. So that was explained. They asked me about the Russia-Ukraine war. I got a very psychological perspective there regarding President Putin's psychology, which is leading to the war, aside from the economic and military aspects of the whole thing. I tried to keep my answers well rounded. It was a very good balance, the interview, between my hobbies, um, current affairs, my home state, and my subject, which is economics. So I remember that the first lady who was there, she asked me a lot of questions regarding Delhi, because this is my home state, and there were questions on waste disposal. There were questions on Delhi government's budget that year, which I had read. Most people don't read state budgets, but I read that. There were questions on certain policies of the government. I had mentioned mentoring students as one of my hobbies.
Mhm.
And I remember there was a controversy regarding Desh Ke Mentor program, which is a program by the government. And they asked me about it. Now, this is a policy that was not so highlighted, the scandal,
Mhm.
uh, in newspapers, but again, I knew answers to those things. So I remember answering around 98% of the questions. There were 1 or 2 questions I couldn't answer, which is fine, because even if in the interview you're not able to answer 20% of the questions, it's completely fine. The board is very cordial. And if you don't know answers to certain questions, you can easily say that, sir or ma'am, I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to this, and they'll pass on to the next question. So there were questions on Delhi, and later on, I was asked on foreign affairs and external affairs and all of that by the next gentleman. Later on, I was asked about my hobbies, quite in
Mhm.
depth. I told you about folk art, about classical art, about all of those things. Very specific questions, and then the discussion veered on to my interest in economics, and I remember having a very interesting discussion on colonialism and how that impacted the economy, the whole drain of wealth theory by
Mhm.
Dada Bhai Nauroji, and how that plays out even today. So, questions on neo-colonialism, and rather a discussion, because I remember by the end of it, it was a very good conversation that I was having. I was contributing, they were contributing, and resulting into a very interesting, very informing debate that we had. At some points, there were differences in views,
Mhm.
and we chose to We chose to agree to disagree very respectfully on that. And the board is so cordial. They
Mhm.
really respect and they're very interested, basically, in knowing what these kids have to say. We're all kids there when we go, frankly. We're all candidates. We know very little as compared to those people who've been in public life since so long. But I really appreciate how so very conducive they are in hearing you out. They asked me a lot about reading as well. What was the latest thing I read? I remember quoting the latest thing I read, which is Persepolis, which is a book by Marianne Satrapi,
Mhm.
coming of age of a girl in the Islamic Revolution, post-Islamic Revolution, Iran, in a liberal family. And then we talked a little about Iranian politics and then the Middle East. So it's the discussion, it happens, it starts from a question and then a circle of conversation is formed there. And finally, we came to the economy, wherein there were questions on the NPA crisis, banking, financial sector reforms, hardcore questions on finance and all of that. Uh, Remember quoting Niti Aayog, many reports that I had read from BCG and all of it. So it was a very, very enriching and very interesting experience, like having a very informed discussion with
Mhm.
elders who are much more, obviously, who are very distinguished and much more informed than you are. And very cordial. I remember everyone smiling all the time. So was I, and contributing to the whole thing. And I remember before I left, Sir said, "But two more questions. That when is the National Voters Day celebrated?" And
Mhm.
I didn't know. I said, "Sir, I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that." And he was totally fine with it. And he said that, "Okay, so tell me, why is it celebrated?" So I told him, and that was it. Then I thanked the board for having me and how much of an honor it was to be there in their company. And I left. Um, and then uh, I waited for my parents to come pick me up.
Mhm.
Once I was done with my interview, I would be okay being vulnerable.
Mhm.
Um, and then, clicking that typical, that picture that has to be done outside of the interview cover. That for me happened post interview. For most of us, that happens before. So I felt truly free then, and that's when I could actually make myself click that photo.
Fantastic. After my interview, I went to Gulati's,
Okay.
and yeah, back in the days, that was a big deal for us. But yeah, that was in my mind. Um, After having gone through this experience, Anna, I have two specific questions. The first one is, was there any question that thoroughly impressed you, that showcased the brilliance of UPSC? That, wow, these are the kind of questions that we get asked in the interview. And secondly, was there any weird question that you thought was out of the blue and was very unexpected?
Well, I don't think there was any weird question. Uh, I know there are many mocks out there which make you expect very weird questions, but that really doesn't happen.
Yeah,
And that didn't happen for me.
thankfully, that doesn't happen.
Yeah, that really doesn't happen. So aspirants can really relax and focus on their core areas. Aside from that, I cannot really pinpoint any one question, but the conversation we had on colonialism and then how it came to neo-colonialism and the colonialism of finance capital. I think that conversation for me was very interesting. Uh, it was very good to hear insights from. By that time, all the members of the board had joined in
Hmm.
that conversation, and it was so good hearing from everyone their perspectives. What impressed me the most was the way it's conducted. The fact that uh, there are people who know so much more than you, and you're just a kid, but they really treat you with a lot of respect. They give you space to answer. They give you space to put across your perspective, and that for me is the most impressive thing. um, and the fact that their wide knowledge on a subject, on any subject, that really impressed me. That was something. Aside from that, I think questions started off being very specific, in my case, very, very specific. And if you knew it, you knew it. If you didn't, you didn't. Thankfully, I knew most of them. But then the fact that it became a conversation, because I remember I kept on adding a lot of references, and then they had a lot to say. So those conversations are something that I will always cherish throughout my life.
I think usually the best interviews are not the interviews, those are conversations. And if you're having a conversation in an interview, you are in a lucky state because you're doing really well in the interview. So, based on your experiences, Anna, and I get this sense already that the board is not looking for someone who can cram facts. They're not looking for someone who can give you information like the Google gives. What are they looking for in a candidate? Even if and when they're asking questions like when's the National Voters' Day celebrated, what are they looking for? What are the 5-6 qualities that they are searching in a candidate via various knowledges, via current affairs, via their background?
Well, let me start by saying that it's UPSC, it's enigmatic, and I'm still not someone who can really say that they're looking for this. But what I can gauge from the whole thing is that they are looking for, first and foremost, someone who's genuine, not someone who is faking things, someone who knows what they know. It might be very little, it might be a lot, but knows what they know definitely, instead of in a very hazy manner. They know someone who can, they like someone, they appreciate someone who can stand by what they say. And finally, someone who's humble, they know how to conduct themselves in a manner which is suitable to that of a public servant. What other people call officer like qualities. So being responsible, being official, being respectful in your conduct, I think that helps. And knowing your thing, whatever little or whatever more you know, in a good enough manner with considerable depth, that helps. Yeah, many people do say that factual, like they're not looking for you to cram facts. That's true, they don't want facts from you, but they do want you to be very clear about your knowledge base. I will say that, because it's not all about opinion. um, I think this is a very big myth that all they ask you is about opinions.
Mm-hmm.
There are interviews that may be solely on opinion, there are interviews solely on facts, and there are interviews in between. And you never know what kind of an interview you might be getting. So you've got to be prepared for the factual things as well. So, but factual for an interview is different from factual for a prelims. So, factual for an interview would mean that you know, for example, that if there has been a fire incident in a hospital near you,
Mm-hmm.
why did it occur? You cannot simply say that it's mismanagement of the hospitals. You have to be more specific. For example, there was COVID that happened, the ICUs were running over capacity. Now, ICUs are sealed places,
Mm-hmm.
so ventilation is very minimal. At the same time, there are a lot of equipments that go into every ICU bed that require more electricity, so there's a lot of load. So plus COVID pandemic necessitated that we use sanitizers, which are usually alcohol based, which is inflammable. So these things come together. If there's load on the electricity panel, there might be a fire incident. That fire incident may spread because there's very little ventilation in an ICU because it's a sealed space, and there is inflammable substances that are there in the form of sanitizers. So these are very specifics that, if you know, would definitely impress the board. Not to say that if you say that it's because of management, and if you are able to, say it very confidently, or put it across in that manner, that may satisfy the board, but try to be specific. That's my advice. Again, might work out differently for different people.
Okay. Makes a lot of sense and very helpful for all the aspirants who are thinking of preparing for this exam. Now, I would want to delve a lot deeper into the other facets of a career in the Indian Police Services. So, during my time at Dartmouth, I stayed and spent a good amount of time in a state called New Hampshire. And the police chief of the state of New Hampshire, the retired one, Frank Moran, he was my neighbor. And when I told him that in India, there's an exam called the UPSC that recruits cops in India, he was astounded by the fact that only 0.5% or so get to become IPS officers. In the US or in other parts of the world, that's not the case. But in countries like India, Pakistan, and our neighbors, it is a very privileged position. Why is that the case? And why are youngsters so attracted to the career in Indian police services?
I think the amount of population that we have, it raises competition, and where there's demand, there's obviously the value of anything goes up. Um, the same holds true for higher education as well. The competition that's there for getting into a good college, for your BA, for your MA, for your PhD, that's there as well. It's not so much there abroad as here. The other thing I think is the colonial legacy that we have of really viewing the civil services as the job, that stays. But I think the most important one is that you get to do a lot. The scope that you get to work here and engage with the general population and with policy at every level, whether that be in police or in administration or in foreign affairs, that's huge there. So these things go into really raising the importance that people have to look at, when they're looking at civil services as a job. With regards to the IPS, I will say that India as a growing country, India as a diverse country, and with increasingly porous borders with the coming of technology, I think internal security is something which is becoming a very, very big focus now, and it should as well. And the police deals exactly with that. It deals with public law and order, it deals with women's safety, it deals with challenges like terrorism, it deals with radicalization. And now, with the coming of technologies, a lot of things have moved online as well. So, mapping radicalization, mapping hotspots of crime, all of these things come in, which is making the IPS a very dynamic job to have, and also very conducive for lady officers. So, I will say that the IPS is really, really gaining popularity in that regard.
So, you spoke briefly about how can a career in IPS be conducive for a woman. Traditionally, it seems, at least at the exterior, that it could be a good profession for someone who is not a female. But many female IPS officers have done tremendous work in the police services. Unfortunately, many young women do not join the IPS because of various biases. What are those biases, and why do you say that the IPS is one of the most conducive careers for a woman to consider?
Well, bias is being that it's a very, very physical job that's there. The training is extremely strenuous physically. The fact that this service involves the use of force, which is not generally seen as a very feminine thing to do. But that being said, I think, for example, the biggest example we have of a very, very, very brilliant IPS officer, lady IPS officer, is Kiran Bedi ma'am, who has done so well, and she's set a very big example for all the ladies. And I think increasingly more and more women are taking the IPS up. Many of my batchmates are there who are ladies, and this myth is breaking that ladies can't do it. um, I would say it's becoming conducive because, number one, a society, as our society in general, is moving to a place where it is accepting women in more diverse roles, which were, traditionally looked at as being very masculine only. And secondly, the fact that public law and order and internal security is now moving to an online sphere and the electronic sphere. So we have uh, all sorts of modules also planned for us during the course, which helps us do the policing online, which helps us preempt crime, which helps us preempt terror. And increasingly, as India becomes digital India, and as we move towards economy 4.0, this space of the online sphere, the cyber sphere of policing is growing, which is making it conducive for the ladies to join the force, and indeed they are. So I think definitely all the myths are breaking now.
Okay. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And I think Mark Andreessen and Peter Thiel say this a lot, that your job is not your identity. Your life is beyond a job. Job is just a labor. And I see this happening across professions. So today there are many people in the armed forces that are also representing India in the Olympics. There are many folks in the IFS who are writing and authoring books. Vikas Swaroop, for example, is one of the names that come to my mind. Um, in the Indian police services, my sense is that you become an IP, you become an SP, you become a DIG, you become an IG. You are taking care of the law and order of the state. You can go for central deputations in the IB or elsewhere. How does MHA promotes culture in the Indian police services? What all additional opportunities do an IPS officer have? Can they pursue their passion? Can they also prepare for Olympics or Asian Games? Can they also, and how helpful is MHA in that regard?
Well, I'm not inducted yet fully into the services, so not a lot of experience there, but I have heard from many seniors that there are loads of opportunities where you get to actually be the person that you are aside from your job. So there are cultural evenings that are there. There are many occasions where you get to showcase your talent. People do take out time for their hobbies. I know many people who are IPS or ex IPS officers who also wrote a lot. Of course, you cannot write about state secrets or any of those things, but yes, you can write. I know people, even IAS officers, who are training in cricket, and they're actually doing really well there, and they plan to play for one of the tournaments there at the national level. So generally there's a very conducive atmosphere, and I know that people get time, um, barring the first few years where you're training and life is very hectic. You get time to do what you like to do best, and those of us who are into other activities and who have a lot of hobbies, they will get a lot of time to pursue those things. So that's an additional perk of this job, that whereas in many corporate careers you may not be getting that kind of time to be your own person. In this in the civil services in general, you get time, and you get, if you're enterprising, you get to create a circle around you of minded people and then follow your interests. It can be in sports or writing or any other thing. There are people I know who are pursuing Kathak at a very high level in the police services. So yes, lots of opportunities to excel in other areas as well, and to be happy in general.
Fantastic. And in terms of skill sets, so for example, when an IS officer, he or she is starting his or her career, they are in charge of the districts. That's a good experience where they get to learn a lot of things, a lot of skill sets. And in later years, they are positioned in the ministries where they are acquiring skill sets across industries. Could be petroleum, could be power, could be foreign ministry, so on and so forth. And therefore, this generalist role allows you to become expert at many things. And therefore, there are many exit opportunities in case you don't wish to pursue your career in the IS anymore. And therefore, there are examples of many IS officers who have gone on to do some brilliant work elsewhere, in the private sector as well. I think I'm unable to recall the name of the head of the Ministry of Param Iyer. Yes, so Param Iyer, he resigned from the IAS and later on worked in World Bank in various capacities, and was laterally hired by the Modi government to lead Swachh Bharat Abhiyan in India. For the IPS officers, what are the opportunities where they can further hone their skill sets? For IS, it could be getting specialized in expertise and getting diverse experiences. For IFS, again, there could be many instances where you are specializing in soft diplomacy or public diplomacy. Sumit did wonderful work in public diplomacy in India. For IPS officers, what skill sets do they hone along the journey, and what skill sets you look forward to honing in your journey?
So the IPS, like any other service, has requires a diverse set of skills, soft skills, and public policing. That's one of the things where you get to be an interface with the public. This is one of the areas where you campaign with the public for better law and order. You must have heard about community policing, etc., being encouraged by the government as well. So. So mobilization of the public and public soft skills in general in dealing with them, uh, creating a jan andolan, that's one. The other is your cyber skills and how you actually conduct preemptive action there. You have skills which speak about de-radicalization, both physical and online as well. Of course, reach out to outreaches to international fora like the FATF, the Interpol, via the CBI. All of these areas are there as well. These days, you then again there are different kinds of crime. So there is white collar crime. There is financial fraud that happens. For that, you have investigations and liaison with other countries. We have with Switzerland, we have with France, we have with around 39 other countries. So economic and white collar offenses is one of them. Terror, etc., and radicalization is can be worked upon as well. That's one of the skills that you hone. There are very senior officers who are working with the Interpol, deputed at the CBI as nodal officers to work with other international fora which are dealing with crime, with terror, with internal security, with economic offenses. So there is a diverse set of skills that, and very different kind of skills, by the way. It's not something that can be usually acquired in the policy sector if you're an outsider or if you're someone who's say worked in a think tank. You might acquire skills akin to that of the IAS or the IFS if you've worked with international organizations. But in the IPS, you acquire very specific skills which can be utilized in very specific and very crucial areas everywhere. And of course, you can later go on to work with international fora which deal with security in general, and be deputed in many places in the government itself.
Yeah, and even in the UN, I think during my time in the UN, there was an IPS officer who was on deputation, working in some really interesting projects there. Uh, so that's a good exit
Our,
opportunity.
our NSA,
Hmm.
Shri Ajit Dovalji, was also an IPS officer, and his diverse skills are really helping us deal with internal security in general, and also liaisoning with external agents to ensure the same. So you could do anything. I think the main thing is to keep on growing in any service that you are in, and really collecting all the skill sets that you can hone along the way.
All right, makes sense. So one thing is that police is a state subject, and when you are considering a career in the Indian Police Services, getting a cadre is also of extreme importance. Getting a preferred cadre. So Kiran Bedi, for example, was able to do incredible work during her tenure because she got a cadre where she was able to get a lot of things rolling in Delhi. So according to you, which are the preferred cadres in the Indian Police Services that are of relevance? I think there are few districts and few divisions where there's a commissionerate system where the perks, power, and privilege of an IPS officer are tremendous. In some cases, that's not the case. So, which are the preferred cadre in the Indian Police Services, and what was your preference and why?
Well, I think preferred cadres in general, they really vary person to person, largely based on where they come from, or the states that are closer to their home, or then where they would actually want to work. So mostly I've seen people choosing states that are their home states. People coming from Rajasthan preferring Rajasthan, people coming from Bihar preferring Bihar. But there are only as many insider vacancies, and which are very less, and you could be posted actually anywhere depending on the vacancies for that year. So for our batch, for example, we still don't have cadres allocated It's very hard to say which is a good cadre. I don't think it's in my place to actually say that. I think any cadre that you get, any zone that you get, and any cadre within that zone, if you are a person who abides by the rules and who believes in conducting their duties to the best of their ability, you will end up leaving a mark. And the main thing for me is not to, um, you know, to reach for the stars or to be out there getting any kind of limelight, but for me to be able to conduct my responsibilities fairly well, and try to make citizens as involved as they can be in safety and security. um, and if we do that, I think any cadre is good. If we do that with humility, I think the very identity of police as a force would change, as our prime minister says that it's not a force, but it's an interface. It's one of the interfaces that citizens have with the government, and it needs to be softened as well. So um, any cadre with any skill set can be a good cadre if we learn the skills and if we stay humble, and if we abide by the rules ourselves. That's what I would say. And yes, people prefer home cadres, but I think at some point we have to leave that out, because very few of us actually end up getting our home cadres. So we should be ready for any posting, and I think any posting is a very good posting.
Absolutely. That's a very good answer, very diplomatic answer. So I'm just looking at parameters here. So one parameter is definitely the where you were born and brought up. That would be one of the preferences. What are the other parameters that you should keep in mind when you are choosing a cadre or opting for a cadre? Of course, you may not get what you desire, but in terms of filling out the options, what are other parameters to consider?
I do know that people look at language as one of the considerations. You are taught the local language of the cadre that you get, but generally I've seen people from the Hindi belt, they prefer the Hindi belt. People from South would prefer their southern states. So language is one of them. As you said, the systems in place, that's one of them. Where do IPS officers have more power? Union territories versus states, where are the powers more? That's one of them as well. There are some states that people generally like to go into, that they feel that those states are very conducive to new policies, to new people, and to governance in general. For example, Rajasthan is always on one of the top preferences for most people. Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh these days a lot.
And why is that the case?
I think most people think that these are the states where relatively the public and the system is very conducive to new work. And people really like those states. So, yeah, these are the considerations. But there are people who work really well in absolutely any state. So,
Mhm.
my basic message for everyone who's listening is basically that your preparation, your preferences, and even your service, these are very fluid. There's no set of rules that you should be following, and what you get, you can do really well in that. So yes, people look at language, people look at the system that's in place, people look at how conducive a state has been to civil servants um, um, in filling out their preferences. But generally, whatever state that you get, there's a lot of scope to be able to do really, really well there.
Absolutely. Very beautifully said, Anna. And another question is that many people, many youngsters who are aiming for a career in the Indian Police Services, they also look at other options in the name of the Indian Armed Forces. Could be the Indian Army, could be the Air Force, could be Navy. So if we were to compare Indian Army, a career in Indian Army versus the Indian Police Services, how should you take a decision? How should one, or what are the metrics that one can consider while deciding upon these two brilliant career options?
Yeah, personally, I was never looking at army as an option, but again, I know batchmates who have cracked, exams for the army, and then they chose to come into the IPS. So, both of them are excellent careers, as you said. Army is slightly different than the IPS. So the Army is looking at external security. The Army, when deployed, is looking at dealing with calamities and humanitarian assistance and relief. For example, in flood situations, when there are elections going on, there are paramilitary forces in place. So all of those things are there for the Army. Relatively, the career in the Army is much more physical, much more physical than a career in the police services. um, if you are someone who loves the thrill of being out there on the field, of being deployed, fighting a war, now lesser than what it used to be before, but definitely that, um, you should definitely go for the army. It's a great career option. Army, navy, air force, whatever might be your preference. In the police services, at the end of the day, it is a civil service, so your interface with civilians is the main thing. You are dealing with internal issues, you're dealing with internal security, you get to interact with people quite a lot, you get to hear their grievances, you get to work upon their grievances, you get to do investigations into crime, you get to um, liaison with international agencies to deflect future issues with internal security. So both of these careers are slightly different. This one is a little relatively less physical and now becoming increasingly more uh, uh, dominant in the cybersphere. So yes, similar but very different. Would depend on you as a person. Which one would you like to go for?
Absolutely. And I think there is also a component called RAW. Usually, the head of RAW is an IPS officer. Is there any separate exam for RAW in India? And if someone wants to be part of RAW, what's the way and means? And usually, it's headed by an IPS officer.
Yes. Yes. So raw, you do have people who are recruited into the intelligence bureau. There are exams for the lower posts that are done by the UPSC. But for raw, as far as I am aware, I don't think there's any separate exam to get you into the higher postings. I think that is done later in your career, as you said that an IPS heads the raw, and for example, an IPS heads the NSA, and an IPS is there in the intelligence bureau as well, heading it. So that happens much later for the higher posts, and depending on your competence. So that of course, the nature of the service is such that the government will not be advertising the lists and the exam as much, because that would defeat the purpose of the raw, of the IB as such. But definitely in the same vein, I think I would have to look into it much more to actually get into the depth of how this is done myself. But again, very interesting career option, and raw in fact entails the superimposition of the foreign services, the army and the IPS. So it's very interesting, big scope there, but direct entry, I'm not too sure about it.
Absolutely. And this is very helpful. And I think you're covering all the buckets. From the way I see that you want to work at the intersection of technology and security. And IPS is definitely an incredible career opportunity here. And going forward, let's assume that that the year is 2040. What dream would you have for India in terms of the law and order matrix? And where do you see India going forward, at least when you are looking from the highest standpoint of 2040?
India is a much more digitized country and a digitized economy, with security being a very digitized, in a very digitized space, and India becoming a much more consolidated nation in terms of its security. More rigid borders, um, much less, issues with identity that are happening these days with regards to your Aadhaar, duplication, and all of it. India as a country which has dealt with radicalization quite efficiently, and definitely India as a country where police is not just seen as an agent of force, but as an agent of as an agent which hears grievances genuinely and responds to them in a very humane manner. Lastly, but definitely very important for me, India has a much more safe country for our women, and women taking up much larger space in public life at all times of the day and all times of the year.
Absolutely phenomenal. I think I always say this, I think all the top CEOs, they optimize for two things in life. The first is human resources. Jeff Bezos is an epitome. And second is financial resources. Warren Buffett is doing that via Berkshire Hathaway. And same is with the country. As long as we have good people, wonderful people occupying important positions, a lot of the mess that the country is or could be in can be solved for. And I'm so delighted that officers like you are becoming part of the governance architecture of India. And I wish you all the very best. This was a brilliant chat where I got to learn various facets of a career in the Indian Police Services, and more so of how to crack an exam, the very difficult UPSC Civil Services exam. Thank you so much for your time, Anna. And any last words for the audience that you might have from your end?
Uh, Thank you so much for having me, first of all. It was an honor being here and being able to share my experiences. For the candidates, I will say that all of you will be having highs and lows throughout the journey, throughout even a single day. But remember, if you feel tired, just sit down, pause, but don't stop. Remember that your goal is much larger than these issues that you're facing. These are temporary. Once you're in the services, you've reached your goal. You will be able to do a lot for the nation in your capacity. And remember the goal and just let it guide you to the summit. And I'm sure all of you out there will be doing really well, will be putting in your best efforts and be succeeding in whatever you choose to do. It may be the civil services or any other plan that you may have for your future. All the best.
All right, thank you.
That's great. So you have a YouTube channel. I saw the interview with Prathit there that you had.
Yeah, just starting it over there, and I think it's a good medium to share information, and I think distribution is of extreme relevance as long as it has legitimate information going through.
You did such a good job there. I mean, anyone would be having doubts. I said this in the beginning as well, but
Mhm.
would be saying this again, that anyone who has a doubt over IAS versus IFS would definitely find it so very informative, and it was so comprehensive. Congratulations to you for that. It was such a good job done.
Okay, I wish you all the very best, and it was such a delight to speak with you. It was effortless. Yeah, look forward to meeting you in person soon. Take care.
Yeah, same here, same here. Great talking to you. All the best and see you soon.